Welcome back to my top 100 board games of all time. Today we're looking at board games number 41 through 50. What is there to say about this list except it's a random sampling of various different kinds of games that I like. So it's fairly balanced in terms of its representation, in terms of complexity, and also the sorts of games that I tend to play. So there's a little bit of everything here. I'm sure you can find something on this list that you're going to like. So why don't we go right into it? My number 50, I don't have here. It is La Granja. This is a game that I actually got rid of because I just felt I had too many similar types of games in my collection. However, I ended up backing a new version of it that was on Kickstarter earlier this year, and this new version addresses the main problem I had with the game was that it didn't have any one true standout aspect. I think with the high production values, a well balanced game that does everything pretty well is actually a much better proposition because I can trick people into playing it with me much more easily if it's like, ooh, look at all the pretty bits. Um, so, devious intentions aside, this is a really solid game that involves uh, multi use cards, managing of resources, dice drafting. It has a lot of things that, if you like specific mechanisms, there's a good chance that there's something either in here that you like or something adjacent to it. There's even a little bit of area control, and it is even a tiny bit mean, which is um, impressive for a game that is ultimately themed around farming. Is it my favorite farm themed game? No, that would be much higher up on my list. But it is one of my favorite farm themed games, and remarkably, one of my favorite farm themed games is good enough to get into my top 50. Just barely. Should I had Mage Knight here? Maybe, given that I ranted about that one for like 14 minutes. But let's leave the past behind. So that is my number 50, which was previously ranked on my list as 78. Its weight is about an 8 and plays 1 to 4 players. That is La Granja. My number 49 is new to the list. It is Risk Legacy. Um, there's a lot about this that would normally not appeal to me. One of which is that it is boxed like something that was meant for a Walmart store shelf, not so much a hobby game store. Uh, its weight is about a 5 out of 10. It is heavier than you remember Risk being, and plays 3 to 5 players comfortably. You might want to stick with the same group, though. The thing is, I've always liked parts of Risk. I've always liked the tension of the combat. I've liked the swings to a degree. Um, I've liked having to manage where you are on the map and sort of bluff that you're not as dangerous as you are. I like those aspects, but they tend to play out in predictable ways after a while. This one adds a campaign element, and this is the first game that was labeled with Legacy. It is not the first campaign style game, and if someone could please tell me what the difference is between a campaign style game and a legacy style game without resorting to just, oh, but stickers, that'd be great. However, it is a lot of fun, and it does saw off some of the rough edges of Risk, so that if you feel like this strategy is just to hole up in Australia and then burst out, it doesn't quite work that way. You also don't have to have every territory in the game controlled. Um, it is possible to just have some territories blank, uh, and you don't have to conquer every single person on the map in order to win the game. So a lot of it's better. The one thing I would say is it doesn't pace out the legacy elements in a way that they did in uh, that I saw in Pandemic Legacy Season 1 and am now seeing in Pandemic Legacy Season 0, where it's there are certain time periods that it hits, certain numbers of games where we're just at the point now where we're going to reveal this element of the game. No, we triggered like 3 or 4 packets in a game that has really only like 8 uh, that add elements to the game in one game. because we specifically tried to play the game in such a way to get those things unlocked. I think the later designs are probably better, but it is actually really cool to see a refined version of Risk actually improve upon the basic design here. So I like it a lot for that. I have a soft spot for Risk, but this is infinitely more playable than those versions. So that is my number 49, Risk Legacy. My number 48 is Paladins of the West Kingdom. This is new to the list. Its weight is about an 8 out of 10, and it will play 1 to 3 players, I would say. I think it's possible to play it at 4, but it would just get really long. It would just take up too much time, in my opinion. I'd play something else if I had 4 players. Paladins of the West Kingdom is just a very solid worker placement adjacent game. There's a tiny little bit of traditional worker placement where the first person to the spot gets to use the ability, and it blocks other players from taking that spot. However, that really only emerges after a certain number of rounds anyway, so it at the start of the game, there's no traditional worker placement. You're mostly just taking your workers and putting them on your own player board, and you don't really care too much about what the other players are doing. So it is maybe a little bit of multiplayer solitaire, but there is a decent amount of indirect interaction with other players where you can take a spot that another person is going to, even if it's not a worker placement situation. It's like, here's a spot where you can put your little piece that will give you a certain benefit, and if you take that benefit, nobody else is going to be able to get that benefit from there. And then maybe if you upgrade your ability to do something, then you can get access to better spots theoretically, but only if you can actually take that action before someone else takes it there. So there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of competition for cards, and even those cards can have a few different ways they work. The game operates with 3 different basic statistics which affect your ability to do things. Every one of the 6 main actions that you can take will take one of those 3 actions as the prerequisite, the thing you need in order to carry out that action, and then there'll be another one of those 3 that will be the effect that it can potentially have. So all possible combinations of input and output are covered by those 6 actions, and you can kind of emphasize them, try to build more towards one than the other. But you also get a paladin, which is the titular character, which will let you sort of boost up those areas temporarily depending on which paladin you have, in addition to giving you a special ability that you will probably want to use sometime over the course of the round. It's a lot like Granja, actually, now that I think about it, in that it's sort of a mishmash of mechanisms, fairly involved, and it's just sort of a combination that I like. It is not... I would be very reluctant to get rid of this game from my collection. It's pretty high up my list for a reason. But it's not to the point where the thought of getting rid of it positively rips my heart out. But it's close. And it's maybe just very slightly closer to that than Granja. So, I think it's a great game, but I also think that this is a game that should probably be kept for confirmed Eurogamers. It's not even that it's super difficult to understand. I've got games like that as well. It's just that it might overwhelm you with how a Euro game it is, and how much is just the interlocking mechanisms. And if you don't like that combination of mechanism upon mechanism upon mechanism, then it's going to get really tiresome here very quickly. So if you're not someone who that appeals to you, I would maybe pick a different Euro game to sort of dip your toe in the water. If you already like Euro games, this is a really good one. I love it a lot, but it's just not for every player, and I wouldn't introduce this even to people who I think could handle more difficult games, unless I felt like, yes, they have a taste for Eurogaming. So that's sort of where it falls. Great game, recommend it quite highly. I think it's my highest ranked West Kingdom game, but yeah, that is Paladins of the West Kingdom. My number 47 is a game that I admit I've only played once, but I think I'm going to really enjoy this game for a long time. I just need to figure out how to get it played more. And that is Cosmic Encounter. Cosmic Encounter is a game that's been around in gaming years forever. It was, I believe, originally released in 1997, although this particular edition, I believe, is from 2008, if I'm remembering correctly, for the Fantasy Flight Edition that I have now here. Um, it also has a tremendous number of expansions, of which I have one. I got it because I figured I want to play this with 6 players, so I got the expansion that seemed to be recommended by people. Cosmic Encounter is a party-ish, negotiation-ish game with a lot of rules. I think this is the cleaner um, implementation of what Munchkin was kind of going for. And you can sort of see how this game has its DNA in that. The thing is, Munchkin drags on too long. This one felt right. Like, it felt like it ended at the right time. I believe we had a 5-player game with a 4-way victory, which is tremendously entertaining because there aren't a heck of a lot of games that are structured in such a way that that can happen. Um, I feel sorry for the one person who lost, but that's beside the point. I just think it's a really interesting system, and I want to explore it with the more complex powers. I want to see how things bounce off each other more, and I want to see how it plays with 6 players and potentially 7, maybe even 8. I could see that working if most of the players are relatively experienced. It's just it feels like streamlined nonsense. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. Streamlined nonsense. I'm all for nonsense. There's a reason why one of the first games that really got me into playing games was Killer Bunnies, which I would not say is an objectively good game. It's just a game that entertained me. But this one is it's going to come to a crescendo and end at about the right time. And it's probably going to not beat up on its players as much as Killer Bunnies will. So I think this is sort of the grown-up version of that game that I was really into, and I'm all for it. I'm ready to play this a whole bunch more. I just need to get it to the table because it's been a while. So that is my number 47, Cosmic Encounter. New to the list. Wait, 4, 5, 6? I don't even know. And plays 4 or more players. It says 3, but why? Why would I try to play this with 3 players? Also, why doesn't it have 6 players out of the box? It seems a little peculiar, like they were specifically trying to sell expansions. But I don't know that for a fact, so I won't say that. Anyways, that is number 47, Cosmic Encounter. Okay. Here's a game I've been playing for a while. This is Lords of Waterdeep. Lords of Waterdeep would not be as high on my list, except for 2 things. One, the expansion is excellent. It is one of the few expansions, maybe the other one being Viticulture with Tuscany, where I will play with the expansion, and if I'm not playing with the expansion, I'll probably just choose a different game to play. I think it's that essential for this one, because the negative aspect of like how many skulls do you want to take, and how much you want to push your luck there, versus ways of mitigating it, versus the fact that the spots that give you skulls are easily the best spots to go in the game when you just desperately need resources. It's It's quite the game. I like it a heck of a lot. Um, but it's just a very simple worker placement game at its core, and that's the other element that comes in. I'm a sucker for worker placement games. I know it's a really popular mechanism, and I would say a disproportionately high number of content creators that I know of cite worker placement as one of their favorite mechanisms in games. And it kind of shows because it feels like it's a disproportionately used mechanism. Um, I like games that are centered on worker placement. It's kind of almost the opposite of deck building for me, where if the game is centered on worker placement and everything flows to and from the worker placement, yes, totally. Give it to me with a twist. Do something other than straight worker placement, which, to be fair, this is just straight worker placement. I do appreciate a twist on it. I do appreciate an innovation, but I don't like having worker placement be a minor element that is only kind of sort of sometimes used. Like, I don't like it where it's maybe one little area of the board that if you take a specific action that you're only going to take like 10 to 15% of the time that it's affected. I prefer the game if it's a worker placement game to either have no worker placement and just focus on other mechanisms, or B, the game is a worker placement game and everything revolves around that. This one definitely does. It's just a straight worker placement with classic blocking. If someone goes there and you wanted to go there, too bad. You're going to have to go someplace else. There is an element of owning spots where you get a benefit if you buy a spot and then someone else uses it. You get a little bonus yourself. But then sometimes you go, you know, I want the bonus, but I also just need the main action too. Maybe I should just take it. Or should I wait to see if someone else is going to give me the bonus because I could do other things too? That's interesting to me, and I do like that quite a bit. The skulls part where there's negative points, but the amount of negative points that each skull is worth uh, increases as they're collectively taken more by the table, which means that if you take a bunch and no one else takes very many, you actually have a massive advantage because you've gotten significantly better actions than they have, and you're not getting dinged for as many negative points as you would have had they gone a little bit heavier into it. So the balance is interesting with the expansion. It's a good game to introduce to people. It ironically gets a little bit worse for introducing to other players when you integrate the expansion because it's just an added layer of complexity that I think new players are not necessarily going to be able to deal with all that well. But despite all that, it's a fantastic game. I would play it pretty much any time. Give me the expansion or give me death, or I guess I can kind of sort of be convinced to play it with someone who's new to games and is probably not ready for the expansion if I must. But can we then play the game immediately again with the expansion? Because that would be great. So that is my number 46. Previously ranked at 41, so it's barely moved at all. Weight is about a 5. Maybe it's closer to a 4 without the expansion. And plays 2 to 6 players, although that 6 player is only available with the expansion, I believe. That is 46 Lords of Waterdeep. Hey, you know what's fun? Having another language on your cards for no discernible reason. That's fine. It doesn't really detract from the game. It's just kind of weird. It's a Deception Murder in Hong Kong. I believe it's called Murder in Hong Kong as the subtitle to justify the fact that they printed the stuff with I don't even remember what the term is, but I believe Chinese lettering, which is not the standard alphabet um, that most of us are used to. Why is it there? I don't know. But it's a great game. It is a social deduction game, and it is a social deduction game that I think I can introduce to people who are maybe a little bit more wary of social deduction games devolving into too much anger and distrust and hatred and venom. Yeah, this one dials it down, but not so much that it loses the tension. There's going to be one murderer, and there's going to be one silent clue giver. The clue giver is going to give clues based on tiles that will have things like location of the crime, victim's occupation. I'm just reading from the back of the box here. Expression on the victim's face, these sorts of things, and they will select from one of the categories. They can sort of use a little body language to indicate, okay, this is hesitating that the victim's expression was peaceful, so maybe it wasn't super peaceful. Or you can be like very definitively, oh yes, the location of the crime was definitely a restaurant. But they can't speak. They can only give these clues, and everyone else has to figure out who among them is the person who committed the crime based on the fact that they have 4 clue cards in front of them and 4 means of death cards in front of them. They selected 1 means of death and 1 clue card to give to the person giving the clues. So only they saw it, and then that person is like, okay, now I will give clues based on the fact that this person had killed with a cleaver and used a video camera to do so. So I don't know. It was clearly in a restaurant because it was a cleaver. Where else would they get a cleaver? That's the idea. But then there can be distrust zone. You can figure out who the person is that you want to accuse, but unless you nail the clue and the means of death that they picked at the start of the game, unless you nail them both correctly, you don't win. You have to get them both. If you get one of them right and one of them wrong, you don't even have it indicated to you that you were partially right. You just are told, no, that is not the correct solution. So it's tricky. And there are a couple of other rules, and there's some interesting stuff in the expansion, which I do have. I like this quite a bit. I honestly am kind of a little bit at a loss for why I haven't played this more, to be completely honest, because I think it's a great social deduction game that I think can be used in a wider variety of circumstances than something like the Resistance, which might be coming up a little bit later on my list. So that's a great game. Definitely recommended if you're out for a social deduction game. I don't find it's as heated as the Resistance. There is still some tension and some interpersonal conflict that happens in this game. But if you're like someone who played Resistance or Werewolf and felt, or Secret Hitler, and you felt like the temperature just needed to be turned down a notch, this might be your jam. So, number 45, previously ranked at 47. Weight is about a 2, maybe could be argued a 3, and will play comfortably 5 to 12 players. Don't play it at 4. It's not quite going to work as well as you would hope. Deception, Murder in Hong Kong. All right. Are you ready for some combat? This is Cyclades. Cyclades is a game about smashing your troops against another player's sets of troops, and no, not really, it's more of an auction game. But the auction game lets you do stuff like smash each other's stuff. And to be fair, with the Titans expansion, which I do have, it is much more direct to smash each other's stuff, and the pacing tends to be better. Okay, so I just mentioned that Lords of Waterdeep is a game that I might only play with the expansion. This is close to that. It's not quite there because I really like the base game. But I also think that has a lot to do with the fact that it puts more stress on the auction element, which is sort of what I enjoy the most. I like that it's an auction engine driving a dudes on the map, smash each other's troops kind of game. I do like that there are some choices to be made about how you're going to power these troops with special reinforcements, with cards that'll give you abilities otherwise, when you're going to pay for them, when you're going to march them, when you're going to bid for something that is just sort of building up your infrastructure, so that you can ultimately get to one of the game's win conditions. I just think it's really cool, and not every game has to be so finely tuned and balanced, and the perfect tournament game. I doubt this game is properly balanced. I doubt this is a game that you could sink hundreds of plays into and still be coming up with different strategies. I just think it's a really interesting game. It is previously ranked at 34, so it's dropped slightly. Its weight is about a 7, and it comfortably plays 3 to 5. I think you can technically play 6 with the expansion, but I'm not 100% certain on that. I'm not sure I would, even if I had the ability to do so. Anyways, that is my number 44, Cyclades. This is such a great game. My number 43 is one of my favorite party games. Just One. Just One is a game that is ultimately about just trying to avoid thinking and doing exactly what other players are going to do. It's a cooperative game. You're trying to get one person to guess a word, but you can only give them single word clues in order to get them to guess it. However, if you give them the same clue or a clue that's close enough, so if you're trying to get them to guess the word royalty and one person says prince and another person says princess, they're etymologically probably close enough that you're just gonna, have to have them cancel each other up. So they go face down, and then the person will have to guess based on one that says crown and another one that says British. So maybe they can get royalty from that, or maybe they're thinking different words. Maybe they're thinking the recently passed Queen Elizabeth II. Who knows? Easily plays 3 to 7 players. The full player count range perfectly well. Works in a lot of situations. Honestly, if I avoid it, it's probably because it's just too easy of a game to pull out. Because I know it's going to work. I almost want to try something a little bit riskier just to see how people react to something that is a little bit harder to track whether or not it's going to go well. So it was previously ranked 35, so it slipped slightly. Its weight is a 1. You can teach this to anybody easily, and again, 3 to 7 players. Terrific party game. If you need a solid party game and you don't have one, go for Just One. You won't regret it. That's my number 43. So there's a certain type of game where you have a map of hexes, and you can build on this map of hexes, and you can potentially go to different types of terrain, which may restrict you. And depending on which things you build from your player board, you're going to get different kinds of income. And so taking something off of your player board will reveal right under it a certain kind of income that you're going to be gaining every round. And then you're going to be using those resources to potentially get other things and put more things onto the board and develop your economy and grow and spread out more and more. There happen to be 3 games that share a very similar framework, like the one I just described, in my top 50, and this one is the lowest of the 3. This is Clans of Caledonia. We'll talk about the other 2 when we get there. But Clans of Caledonia is my least favorite of the 3, and it's still my 42nd favorite board game of all time. It is excellent. It is great. It is just not quite as good as those other 2. And it's simpler than those other 2. It's previously was ranked 36. Its weight is an 8 out of 10, so yeah, simpler, air quotes. And we'll play 1 to 4 players, and I wouldn't have a problem with playing at any of those counts. This is probably the one that No, that's not true now. I was going to say it's the one I've played the most solo. Another one of those other 2 has overtaken it recently due to a recent spat of solo plays. And I'll explain why probably when I get to it. This one has the most charming art and pastel style, and it's more focused on just pure money. Everything that you can get, all the resources are ultimately related back to how they cash in for money, and that's basically how you run your economy, is getting cash for your various goods. Although you cash in your goods for points in other ways too, and then there's also end-game scoring bonuses, and there's these contracts that you're trying to fulfill, which is something that is definitely unique to this one. It's different enough is the main thing I would say. As much as I might like those other two better, it's not this huge, massive gap. This feels like another designer's take on that style of game, and I appreciate that. Um, but I think I prefer the original. So that's why you might be seeing those other two games up significantly higher on this list. This one, though, there's a good chance that if you play all three, you might still like this one the best. I could absolutely see that. And I think if you're feeling like the other two are just a little too heavy for you, or the resources aren't as laser focused, or you don't have like the um, concrete objectives to try to fulfill as you do with the literal contracts that you have in this game, you might like this one the best, honestly. Great game. Heavy game in a relatively tiny box. Nice wooden pieces, though. Decently expensive, though. Costs a fair chunk of change for, like, this is far from the largest box that I've even discussed today, so. Number 42, Clans of Caledonia. Oh, the Answer to the Life of the Universe and Everything, incidentally, is Clans of Caledonia. Alright, last one here. Lost Ruins of Arnak. This is my number 41. It is new to the list. Its weight is about a 6. And it plays 1 to 4 players. Happily would play it in any of those player counts. This is a game that is... If you draw a spectrum of strategy games, from those that are most strategic, where it's all about the long-term plan and setting it up and then executing that plan and really having everything figured out from the beginning on one end of the spectrum, and then at the other end of the spectrum, just highly tactical, all decisions you make in the moment, like, that's going to work with my what I've got so far, that one's not, so I'll go with this one instead of that one. I kind of need this now, so I'll go get that thing now, and then I'll go do this thing. All in the moment, all tactical, immediate decisions. Not thoughtless, because thoughtless would just be, I'll just do the thing that results in winning over and over and over and over until the game ends. No. It's still strategic, but it's on the much more tactical end. This one falls so far on this end of the spectrum, on the tactical end of the spectrum, on improvising and making things up as you go, that's actually kind of it's a bit of gaming whiplash to play it, especially after you've played something that's maybe a little bit more rewarding, setting yourself up and making a long-term plan, because most games have at least a small amount of that in them. This one almost does not at all. Most of the games are falling somewhere in the middle of that spectrum, even if they lean to one wing or the other. Not this one. This one is just purely the tactical game. It is beautiful. It is doesn't overstay its welcome. It's an element of deck building that is not all about deck building, which is usually what I prefer. It's a big hit from 2020, and I think a lot of people are going to like it and play it for quite some time. I also think there's another game that I would rather play. That is Lost Ruins of Arnak.
I am ruining a video! I am ruining a video! I am ruining a video! I am ruining a video!
So that is my top 41 to 50 from my top 100 series. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.